It is a list-like syntax. Basically, what that means is that there are a lot of parentheses, right? So everything is enclosed in its own set of parentheses, which for those of you that are already experienced developers, depending on what languages you're coming from, this might be really strange to look at first. It definitely was for me. You know, I come from a JavaScript background. So when I started looking at Clarity at first, it was pretty intimidating. But once you kind of get the hang of it, it's actually really cool to write. And I have found that it's just a very nicely organized way of writing your code, I think. So that's something to keep in mind. It can be conceptualized by thinking of lists inside of lists. Expressions use Polish notation. So basically what this means, if you're thinking of like a mathematical expression, it's where an operator precedes its operands. And we'll take a look at an example of what that looks like here in a second. They follow a basic pattern, opening parentheses, followed by a function name, followed by optional parameters, and then the closing parentheses. And of course, there's comments. They're prefixed by a double semicolon, and comments can be inline. So you can write your comment like directly on the same line as your code. So to take a look at some examples, here in this first one is kind of give you an idea of Polish notation if you're not familiar with it. So in our plus 4, 5, basically you can just think of that as 4 plus 5, right? We just always write the operand at the beginning. Same thing with our concatenation here. And then down at the bottom example, we look at some of the comments, right? So you can write comments pretty much all around your code. One thing to keep in mind is, we'll get into this a little bit more when we look at the costs for running your functions and for deploying your contract, right? Everything it costs something, and that includes comments. So as you're running your contract, it's important to keep in mind that you only want to have comments in your contracts that are absolutely necessary. If you have like a ton of comments within every single function, those will add to the cost of your transactions. So here's another example of a function that we have here. So like I said, Clarity is a Lisp-like language, which uses a lot of parentheses. So you can see everything is enclosed. Every expression is wrapped in its own set of parentheses. So let's go through and break down this block of code real quick. Clarity has 3 types of functions, which we will go into more detail a little bit later. But here we're looking at a public function, which, as the name suggests, is public. And so it can be called by anybody once the contract is deployed. So the function we have defined here is a public function. Functions are defined in 2 parts. So the first part is the function signature, which includes the function name and any parameters it takes. Hang on, I'm going to try to annotate this, see if maybe that helps. Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so function signature, like I said, takes a function name and any parameters. And then you have your function body, in which here we see a few things. So first we see this OK, which wraps the entire function expression. So as I said, functions must return a response type. That's going to be either OK or an error. An OK response just means that the function executed correctly, and so any changes that were made will materialize to the chain, whereas an error response will abort the function execution, and this happens regardless of where in the function it occurs. So here we're just saying that that we're executing okay here. Now looking across, we see var set, right? So this is a built-in function. Let me clear all that. Var set, built-in function in Clarity. Clarity has quite a few built-in functions, and I believe that we shared the link to the list of built-in functions in the Notion resources, but if we didn't, we can get that shared to you guys as well. So basically var set just set the value of a specified variable. So for this example, we can imagine that somewhere higher up in the code, we have defined a variable called sorry about that. So somewhere up here, we have already defined this variable, right? So we are setting this variable called count to the result of this expression here. So again, we're using Polish notation. So our operand is up at the front. Basically what this is saying is add var get, which is another built-in function that just retrieves the value of a variable. So add whatever the value is for count. Let's assume that this has been like initiated to 0, right? Say up here, we said u0 is what our count variable stands for. So all we're saying is add that with this input that we set it to. So plus, sorry, we're adding u0 plus u1. And basically what this should do is essentially be a counter function, right? So this count variable will always be set to whatever the current value is plus 1.